Thank you to Steve and to Dr. Topol for putting this conference together and to have us out here. I'm not a doctor. I am barely a patient sometimes, it seems. And we had an idea, we meaning my wife and I. My wife is a doctor, Dr. Renee Dua. She's Chief Medical Officer and co-founder of HEAL. And in the fall of 2014, we had two little boys, and in the difficulty of having twin infant boys, one of whom had some health issues, and trying to get them to the doctor's office while one was home and one was there, and there was a nanny, and we both had jobs, we realized how hard it is to get quality and timely access to medical care. And based on that, we had a very simple idea. Why don't we do doctor house calls, right? Why don't we bring back, using technology, this capability, this power of bringing a doctor to the patient instead of a patient to the doctor? And so we thought, well, wow, this 1970, 40% of patients were seen in the privacy of their own home, but by this year, it will be less than 5% of patients that are seen in house calls, less than 2%, I even think. So is this even an idea? Is this something, or are we just crazy to think this, right? So I said, well, there's gotta be people smarter than me that have thought about this, and I read a book, and I found some quotes from that book that I thought I would read. Some very, very bright person said, the idea of going down to your doctor's office is going to feel as foreign as going to a video store, right? Does anyone know who said that? It's Dr. Eric Topol, sitting right here, in a book called The Patient Will See You Now. So I thought to myself in 2014, well, I haven't been to a video store, and when was the last time anyone here went to a video store? Okay, so, and then he went on to say something else, which is the hospital is an edifice for intensive care units and the operating room. Everything else can be done more safely, more conveniently, more economically in the patient's bedroom. So there we were, off and running. Thank you, Dr. Topol. Read his book and said, well, there are really smart people who think this is a good idea. So the fundamental thing that we do at HEAL, and that we have done since our founding in October 1, 2014, just 3 years ago, we launched HEAL in March of 2015. We were in network with all the insurance plans, and I'll talk about that, by March of 2016. Since that time, since March of 2016 to now, we have delivered over 25,000 house calls. Okay, to real patients. And when I say house calls, this is a real licensed medical doctor coming to your home, office, hotel room, wherever you happen to be. And we operate 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., 365 days a year, 7 days a week. Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, Christmas, Diwali, Kwanzaa, whatever your day happens to be, we're there, right? And we deliver doctor. And we can do in the home, as Dr. Topol's prescient quote said, basically everything that is not acute illness or not, traumatic illness or injury or massively broken bones, from sutures and well baby exams to fluorescein eye exams and light therapy to physicals and flu shots and everything in between. Right? Now, to do house calls and to make them work, am I okay walking away from this? Am I still mic'd? Okay, good. So to do house calls and to make, I should take my clicker, sorry. To do house calls and to make this work requires three things, right? The first fundamental thing it requires, because there's a pyramid in healthcare, and people often forget that there are three parts of this, three Ps as I like to call them: the patients, the providers, and the payers, right? And if you have a solution that patients love but insurance companies aren't going to pay for, or that doctors love but patients don't love, or any one of those constituents or two doesn't love, it's not going to work. Okay, so how do you serve all three of these constituencies? Well, you serve all three of these constituencies based on their own unique needs. What does an insurance company, self-insured corporation, Medicare, or consumer want? They want to save money, right? So the first thing you have to do is be able to deliver house calls that actually reduce the cost of healthcare. And that seems counterintuitive, because obviously sitting in traffic in any major city, if a doctor is able to see over a 12-hour day, 10, 14, 15 patients, that's about it. But in their doctor's office, they see 40 patients, right? So how do you make that happen? The second thing that you have to be able to do is you have to be able to make the doctors happy. Why would doctors want to do this, right? If you don't have doctors, you don't have doctor house calls. Well, you have to understand what makes doctors unhappy about the current healthcare system. No one disputes that doctors are unhappy, but and primary care is becoming an arduous, laborious practice, whether in pediatrics, family medicine, internal medicine, geriatrics. How do you make it better for how are house calls actually better for doctors? And then the third constituency is, of course, the patient, and making sure that you are delivering to them quality, timely clinical care. And it's easiest to understand the value to the patient because when you're sick or your kids are sick, if anyone's has kids and has ever had to take them to the doctor's office when they're sick on a weekday versus a doctor coming to your house on Sunday afternoon when you first find out they're sick, it's impossible to think that one is not more convenient than the other. Okay, but convenience alone doesn't solve the other problems, and that's what we're going to talk about a little bit. So most of you know this data, so I'm not going to spend that much time on it, but I think it's important to point out that doctors are 4% of the cost of the healthcare system, okay? Whereas we spend 3 times as much money on wasted tests and prescriptions, 50% of all prescription medications that are filled and paid for are never actually taken, than we do on all the doctors in America combined put together, okay? These are some of the opportunities for savings. Doctors in office environments are spending 55% of their time on bureaucracy and only 45% of their time seeing patients. And 80% of health outcomes are determined by environmental factors, lifestyle, behavior, diet, smoking, mildew, asthma-related allergens, these kinds of things. So when you look at all of these things, you say, wow, so I'm able to pay doctors, but if my house calls, because they're in the home, and if I build technology that reduces the time in bureaucracy, and if when I go into a patient's home, I practice a better brand of medicine, then I could actually deliver on this magic triangle of reducing cost and improving healthcare outcomes, right? And let's remember something. The only real lasting way to reduce healthcare outcomes is to reduce healthcare costs is to improve health outcomes, right? Whenever I hear the healthcare debate in Washington, and I listen to the people on this side, there's people on this side, and oftentimes the more liberal or democratic argument is, well, it's the right thing to do, and we should give healthcare to people who can't afford it, and we should be humanitarian. And I always say, you're making absolutely the wrong argument. We should give great healthcare to everyone because it's the cheapest way to give healthcare to anyone. Right? We don't want people rushing to the emergency room with heart attacks. We may as well treat them for diabetes when they're still in their house, right? Or when they're still at home. It's an investment, just like education, in lowering cost and improving outcomes. So we went and built this. We said, okay, to deliver these house calls, the first thing we have to do is we have to take and build a platform that takes all that bureaucracy out, okay? We built a platform that reduces healthcare bureaucracy and operating expenses by 65%. What that means is at the same rates, because, the other thing here that I forgot to mention is, of course, this isn't supposed to be a premium concierge service for which we charge $500 a visit, and that, of course, we can make it work because the patient's paying more. That's not a mass market solution. That's not a solution about accessibility. It's not a solution for the regular person. Right? A solution for the regular person has to build technology. This is my part of it. I'm the nerd. I'm the technologist. I'm the engineer who went and led the engineering team that built the platform that reduces healthcare operating costs by 65%. Okay? And what that means is that from the point where you book a Heal appointment on the Heal app to you work with partners like Noga, who just gave a great talk, to maybe get your medical records, to verify your insurance, to schedule the doctor, to book the doctor, to dispatch the doctor, to create your medical record, to have the doctor and the medical assistant come to your house, to chart your visit, to code your visit, to send out the prescription, to pay the doctor, to chart the visit, to send it to insurance. 100% of that is a seamless, paperless, humanless system, okay? The first of its kind. In doing so, now if you look at it and you say, okay, 35 patients in a day in the doctor's office, less 65%, now we can make this work at 14 patients a day. But the beauty of doing that is that now all of a sudden our doctors are, according to a very well-known research institute that will be publishing a manuscript here in the near future, arriving at your home over the first 25,000 house calls we have done within 98 minutes of you booking a doctor's appointment. 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and they are spending 28 minutes with the patient. That is 3 times the national average of primary care in a doctor's office. That is a manuscript being published by Dr. Steinhubel and Dr. Topol here at Scripps, who did this study for us, okay? So this is real data. And what that means, when you spend more time with the patient, and when you have the ability to do comprehensive care, and the important point about comprehensive care is that every time I come down and see Dr. Topol, or every time I go to these HIMSS or whatever, there's a $1 trillion industry innovating, miniaturizing diagnostic tools and technologies. We don't have to build those things. Whether it's an EKG machine or a blood sugar machine or this or that, it's getting fingerless. The FDA just approved the first prickless blood sugar monitor, right? Continuous blood sugar that doesn't have to prick your finger, right? These kinds of innovations are there. We just have to put them in a doctor's kit and send them to people's houses. And when I say things like true medication reconciliation, here's what I mean. 47-year-old guy like me goes to a doctor's office, eats too many burritos. The doctor says, Nick, are you eating more green vegetables and taking your blood pressure medication? Of course I am, doctor, right? I leave there, I eat 3 burritos on my way home, and I don't take the damn blood pressure medication. Doctor comes into my house, he sees the Taco Bell wrappers all over the place, and he sees, and he says, or she says, let me see your blood pressure medication bottle. And it was filled 30 days ago, and there's a lot of pills in there. So maybe I'm not taking it, right? This is the kind of context. Or in a very recent patient case that we actually had, a patient had seen 8 different doctors for migraines, had 3 MRIs, probably $15,000 of cost between him and the healthcare system. Doctor went in and saw black mold in the bathroom. Black mold causes migraines and can be very easily cleaned, right? Contextual relevance, the parent who rushes the 3-year-old to the hospital thinking the kid has asthma, but he's allergic to the neighbor's cat. Right? These kinds of things are what we do in the home, and these kinds of things are what we do with that extra 19 minutes that we're spending with the patient. These are the kinds of things that when we go and in telemedicine is a very popular growing solution nowadays. You go during cold and flu season, you call the doctor, you've never spoken to him before, you cough into the phone, you're going to get a prescription for a Z-Pak. The data says 98% of patients who describe cold and flu-like symptoms to telemedicine get a prescription for an antibiotic. The national average for that number in doctor's office is 46%. Our average is 22%. And the difference is we have the time to say, this is just a cold. We also have the time, on the other hand, because that's a false positive where you're prescribing a medication you don't need, but the false negative where it's not, hey, Nick, okay, you have a sore throat, we're going to give you this pill or that drop or whatever the case may be. But Nick, you've had a sore throat for the last time I came here 3 months ago to check on your cold, you had a sore throat. What's really going on? Let's get into this and let's diagnose and find out what's really going on. In my case, what's going on is I basically talk for a living. So, I don't know if there's a cure to that. My wife would certainly like me to shut up. But the point is what we are able to do by delivering comprehensive care with exceptionally high quality doctors. The great thing about this is that we are liberating doctors to provide extremely high quality care. Right? Doctors don't go into primary medicine to become millionaires or billionaires or zillionaires anymore. Right? They don't. Because if you wanted to do that, you'd go to 4 years of school instead of 12 and go get a job at Google. Right? You would not go into pediatrics. You go into it because you have a love of practicing medicine and you want to make the patients feel better. And in an environment where the CDC's own estimate is for the average census of patients, a primary care doctor would have to work 21.7 hours a day, 365 days a year, you're setting doctors up to fail. Right? And they don't want to fail. When you give them that time back, when you give them the technology, when you give them access to a home environment, when the patient is relaxed, when the doctor can actually take the time to talk to the patient, that's what doctors want. And when you can say to a doctor who's been at Kaiser or Sutter or Dignity, making 180 grand, seeing 40 patients, spending 700 hours a year on unpaid time doing paperwork, charting, and meetings, and you could say, come out of that. We're going to put you in a heel car with an MA who's going to drive you. With these state-of-the-art tools, you're going to see 14 patients a day, and oh, by the way, you're going to make exactly the same money. That's how you get great doctors. And when you do all that, you have a formula. We get to you in under 2 hours. We spend 9.5, the national average is 9.5 minutes. We're spending actually 28 minutes with the patient. This is a dated graphic. And you can understand the environmental context. You can improve the outcomes and lower the cost. And I just gave you one example with the antibiotic. Right? Let's take an example where you need medication. You actually have the flu and you need Tamiflu, except your doctor is going to wait 3 days before they can see you. Well, you need to take Tamiflu in the first 24 hours of symptoms. And if your doctor can't see you for 3 days, maybe if you're a healthy adult, you'll just suffer and get over the flu. But if you are a 5-year-old with asthma, you might end up in the hospital. Right? This is cutting costs, which is to say nothing of the fact that 80% of emergency room and urgent care visits are for non-emergency purposes that, again, per Dr. Topol's very prescient quote, can be done in the privacy, comfort, and convenience of your own home, right? The other thing that happens is a very important mental phenomenon, which is by the time people get up, get in their car, take the appointment, have waited, sat in the waiting room, paid the thing, had their thing Xeroxed, sat next to dirty, sick people, whatever, by the time they get into the doctor's office, they're like, I gotta get some value out of this. Ooh, they're giving me an MRI. Ooh, I'm getting a test. If the doctor just sends you home saying, you know what, it's a cold, bye. Right? Doesn't feel as good. But the inertia works the other way. When you're in a patient's house and they have back pain and they're laying in bed and you've come and see them while they have back pain and you're able to say, look, put heat on this, be a little more active, do this, do that in the patient's home, they feel like they got value because they didn't have to leave their house. And what does that all result in? It results in this. Across our first 20,000 patients, we've delivered $12 million of healthcare cost savings. We reduced trips to the ER by 28%. Prescription usage compared to similar cohorts by 39%, labs and referrals by over 60%, and most importantly to me, we have detected over 1,100 previously unknown issues. Because what we are able to do in that extra time that we have with the patient, that the doctors in this room will love, and Medicare loves, and insurance companies love, is close the gaps in care. Right? There's now a prevailing measure called the HEDIS measures, right? 83 different scores, if you're familiar with that, right? Have you had your pap smear? Have you done this? Have you done that? We are able to take the time to do an H&P, history and physical, ask the patient those questions, understand what they have, and make sure that even though we went there for a cold, we make sure this woman gets a breast exam or gets a pap smear, or this 47-year-old guy gets his prostate exam because his father had prostate cancer, and he starts taking these things seriously. And now we're moving into preventative and eventually predictive care and improving outcomes for patients, improving lifespans, and in doing so, reducing costs. Now, the important thing about this is that house calls are not just reducing money in the ways that we just talked about, but it's a gateway for reducing costs throughout the care continuum. The cost in healthcare in this blue box here, right? Hospital, ER, RX specialties. If you deliver timely, preventative, proactive primary care and you make it easy and effective to get, by owning that, you control the cost there, and that allows us to do managed care deals, and we have a number of exciting announcements coming up in the next few months where we are taking on all of the primary, preventive, and urgent care. I won't spend a lot of time on this slide. This is the money slide. I use this for investors, but there's a point to this, which is the economics actually work. We can actually make money doing this, and that's not just important because I'm a greedy capitalist, but it's also important because if you can't make money doing this, then you can't employ doctors, and people won't invest, and it's not sustainable, right? It has to make economic sense for the patient, for the payer, for the provider, and for the company, right? And it does make economic sense. So what we've done, we deliver house calls for a lot of companies. We are in network with all the insurance partners. About 28,000 patients seen. And I'll close quickly by saying this. We believe that the house call is a gateway for delivering a lot of other services and a lot of other modalities of care. The context of remote monitoring your blood pressure, your blood sugar, or your PTINR, or whatever the case may be, is only a value, A, if the machine is set up correctly, B, if not you, but your doctor's looking at the data. My father's 80 years old. He recently had a scare where it was gas, but he thought he was having a heart attack at 2 in the morning. My mom called me, said whatever. We sent a heel doctor the next day, said, hey, you should track your blood pressure over the next few days. My dad measured his blood pressure 350 times in the next 2 days. I know because I got a text message every single time, right? That's not what you need to be doing. Your doctor needs to look at it. And imagine the context of a doctor coming to your house, telling you need to monitor your blood pressure, the MA actually hooking up the monitor, and then, this is in the future, us looking at that data and then you calling because you feel sick, or better yet, we calling you or contacting you and say, hey, your blood pressure is a bit up, and looking at your data in real time while consulting you remotely with a doctor you actually know that's been in your house, that knows the context, that knows the home environment. Take that to the other end of the spectrum, and it's a new mom who's just come home with her baby. She's trying to get feeding done. She's having pain. She doesn't know what to do. The doctor comes and says, you don't have mastitis, but maybe you could have a lactation consultant come, and then having a lactation consultant or physical therapist for your bad back be delivered through the exact same service. That's called closing the gaps in care, closing the loop, and providing increased value to the patient, to the provider, and to the insurance community. Thank you very much.